Right. Cheers. Welcome to. We'll keep this on. Welcome to the last Technician's Guide to the Let's Sing Secondary Science lessons, and this is the 19th lesson, the last one in Year 8. And we start this lesson with the students, and it's nice if they can all see this in their groups. The raisins rising and falling as the carbon dioxide bubbles stick to them and reduce the density, so they rise and fall. And that's a lovely way of starting the lesson. So that's, you're going to need some lemonade and some raisins and some either plastic beakers, I've got none of those, or glasses, whatever, so just clear plastic glasses at the type people use for parties. So that's the first thing you're going to need to have for all of the students. The main equipment setup for lesson 19, floating and thinking, you'll need to play around with. I'll show you how I've made it work. At first, I used a 1,000 milliliter beaker, but actually I found this glass measuring cylinder works much better, because what you're actually doing is you need some very small test tubes. The smaller the better. What the students are doing is they're adding water to these test tubes to get it to float or sink in a column of water, and I've found that this works. It works much better with the measuring cylinder. So what they want to do is they want to experiment and get a tube that will sink, get a tube that will float, and then try and get a tube that hovers somewhere in the middle, that doesn't float or sink, and experiment with that and actually find out what is the mass, what is the volume. So they'll need balancers as well as pipettes to add water. What is the mass and the volume of a tube that sinks, that floats, and just hovers in the water, that goes halfway. And then what they can do is they're going to add salt to this, so that a tube that just sinks, if you add salt to it, which I'll try, if you add salt to it, it will float, because you're changing the density of the solution. So if you add salt, because the water is now more dense than these float. And that's what you want the students to be able to do. So they need to be able to play around and experiment and really think about what makes this float and sink, but actually why does a sinker float when I add salt to it? And there's a further activity where you can use liquid paraffin as well, so they can see what happens when you put a sinker or a floater in liquid paraffin. So it's quite a complicated setup, and I tried it with these test tubes, but actually I found I had to buy some of these, but actually they're quite cheap. So you might need to purchase some very small ones and some very small bungs to go in the end, because it's just much easier for the students.